There comes a point in this kind of relationship where you stop asking, "What else can I do to make this better?" And you start asking, "Why do I feel worse every time I try?" You gave attention, patience, understanding, second chances, and emotional energy. You tried to explain yourself clearly. You tried to stay calm. You tried to love in a way that was honest and stable. And somehow, the more you gave, the more confused you became. You started questioning your own tone, your own memory, your own intentions. You felt pulled in, pushed away, blamed, tested, and emotionally drained. If that happened to you, I want to say something very clearly at the beginning. You were not struggling because you were too weak, too sensitive, or too difficult to love. You were struggling because you were inside a dynamic built on imbalance. And once you understand that, one truth becomes very important. Ignoring a narcissistic woman changes everything, because attention is often the fuel that keeps the whole system running. That does not mean silence is a game. It does not mean distance is punishment. And it does not mean you are trying to win. It means you are finally stepping out of a pattern where your emotional reactions were being used to maintain control. That is why ignoring her can feel so powerful and also so hard. It is not just about not texting back. It is not just about not arguing. It is about breaking a role you were pushed into without even fully realizing it. The role of the one who chases, explains, fixes, proves, reassures, and absorbs. In many of these relationships, the real issue was never the specific argument. It was never just about what you said or what you forgot or how quickly you responded. The deeper issue was control through emotional positioning. She needed to be the center of your focus. She needed to feel that she could reach into your mind, shift your mood, change your day, and pull your attention back whenever she wanted. That is why small things became big things. That is why peace never lasted. That is why the relationship often felt like a test you were always failing, even though the rules kept changing. When a woman has strong narcissistic patterns, attention is rarely experienced as simple connection. It becomes proof of power, proof of importance, proof of control, proof that she still has access to your emotional system. So when you stop feeding that cycle, something major changes. Not because ignoring someone is magically powerful, but because you are no longer participating in the mechanism that allowed the manipulation to work. You are no longer giving her the emotional material she used to shape the relationship in her favor. A lot of people misunderstand this. They think the change happens because she suddenly values you more. Sometimes she may seem to. Sometimes the silence makes her come closer, act sweeter, or try harder. But that surface reaction is not always growth, and it is not always love. Very often, it is a response to losing access. The shift is not necessarily that she sees your worth for the first time. The shift is that she can no longer control the rhythm as easily. She can no longer predict you the same way. She can no longer count on you to keep proving that her behavior has emotional reach. Think about how these dynamics usually work. She may withdraw to make you anxious. She may become cold to make you chase. She may accuse you of not caring to pull reassurance out of you. She may create jealousy, tension, confusion, or emotional instability just to check if she still matters to you in the way she wants. She may punish you for having needs. She may make tenderness feel conditional. She may present herself as misunderstood while making you carry the emotional weight of the relationship. And over time, without realizing it, you start living in reaction mode. Your peace depends on her mood. Your confidence depends on her approval. Your emotional stability depends on whether she is warm or distant that day. That is where the damage happens. Not just in the fights, but in the constant training of your nervous system. You become hyper-aware. You monitor her tone. You overanalyze messages. You rehearse conversations in your head. You feel relief when things are calm, but that relief never becomes security because some part of you knows it can disappear at any moment. And when someone lives like that for long enough, they stop trusting their own internal reality. They start managing themselves around another person's instability. So when you begin to ignore her, what really changes is not just the external interaction. Your attention begins to return to you. Your mind starts to separate from her emotional field. The grip weakens. You notice how much of your mental space was occupied by anticipation, fear, guilt, and emotional checking. You notice how often you were pulled into conversations that were never meant to resolve anything. You notice how many of her reactions were designed to get a response, not to create understanding. And that awareness is powerful, because manipulation works best when it stays emotionally immediate. Once you step back and observe the pattern, it starts losing its force. This is why ignoring her often triggers stronger behavior at first. She may become more charming, more emotional, more accusing, more seductive, more wounded, or more aggressive. She may act like you are cruel. She may suggest that you changed. She may imply that you are cold, selfish, or emotionally immature. She may suddenly say all the things you waited a long time to hear. Or she may try to provoke you so she can pull you back into the old position. Why does that happen? Because the system is being interrupted. The usual methods are no longer getting the same result. And when control starts slipping, people with narcissistic traits often escalate before they adjust. This is where many people get pulled back in. They think the stronger reaction means the connection is real, or that the silence is working in a romantic way, or that this is finally the breakthrough. But often, what you are seeing is not intimacy. You are seeing the discomfort of losing emotional leverage. And if you do not understand that, you can mistake re-engagement for change. You can interpret pursuit as love when it may actually be resistance to losing influence. That is why ignoring her changes everything for you, even more than it changes things for her. It forces you to face something deeply important. How much of this relationship was built on your constant emotional availability? How much of your love became self-abandonment? How much of your patience became permission for mistreatment? How many times did you call it connection when it was really a cycle of tension and relief? Those questions can be painful, but they bring clarity, and clarity is the beginning of freedom. Ignoring her in a healthy sense means you stop responding to bait. You stop defending yourself against distorted accusations. You stop trying to explain your heart to someone committed to misreading it. You stop chasing after sudden distance. You stop trying to earn softness from someone who weaponizes withholding. You stop treating every emotional shift like a problem you need to solve. This is not cruelty. This is discernment. This is the moment you realize that not every message deserves a response. Not every misunderstanding is accidental, and not every conflict is meant to be healed. One of the most painful parts of these relationships is that you are likely trained to focus on her wounds while ignoring your own. Maybe she had a difficult past. Maybe she spoke about being betrayed, abandoned, or not understood. Maybe she used vulnerability in a way that made you feel responsible for staying patient, no matter how badly you were treated. And yes, pain can shape harmful behavior, but pain does not excuse manipulation. A wounded person still has choices. A difficult history does not give someone the right to distort your reality, punish your boundaries, or feed on your attention while giving little emotional safety in return. This matters because many good people stay trapped by empathy. They keep thinking, if I can just love her in the right way, maybe she'll feel safe enough to stop. But But the problem was never your lack of love. The problem was that love was being pulled into a power structure. Your empathy was being used against you. Your willingness to understand became the very thing that kept you engaged in a pattern that was slowly hurting you. And here is another truth that people need to hear. Ignoring her does not mean you no longer care. Often it means you care enough about yourself to stop feeding what is destroying your peace. You are not being heartless. You are finally refusing to let your nervous system be used as someone else's emotional supply. You are refusing to let confusion be called love. You are refusing to keep standing in a room where your reality is constantly edited. That is why your silence can feel so unfamiliar at first. You may feel guilt. You may feel anxiety. You may feel the urge to check her social media, reread old messages, or respond just to clear the tension. That does not mean you are doing the wrong thing. It means your mind and body became used to the cycle. You were conditioned to believe that emotional contact, even painful contact, was necessary for relief. But real relief does not come from re-entering the same loop. Real relief comes from stepping out of it long enough to see it clearly. As the distance grows, you may begin remembering things differently. Moments that once seemed romantic may start looking manipulative. Arguments that left you apologizing may look completely different when you review them calmly. You may see how often your feelings were dismissed, how often your boundaries were reframed as rejection, how often your care was expected but not returned. This is one of the biggest reasons ignoring her changes everything. It gives your mind enough quiet to process what was happening without her influence sitting on top of your thoughts. And with that quiet comes grief. Not just grief over her, but grief over who you were while trying to survive the relationship. Grief over how much energy you spent. Grief over how long you stayed confused. Grief over how often you betrayed your own instincts just to keep the bond alive. That grief is real. It deserves respect. But it is also part of healing. Because when denial falls away, truth has room to enter. At some point, the goal shifts. In the beginning, you may ignore her because you are exhausted. Then you may continue because you want clarity. Eventually, if healing really starts happening, you ignore the drama because you no longer need to live inside it. You no longer need the answer, the apology, the final conversation, the perfect closure. You stop trying to get emotional justice from someone who built the relationship around imbalance. You realize that waiting for a manipulative person to validate your pain can keep you stuck longer than the relationship itself. That is where boundaries become more than words. A real boundary is not just something you say, it is something you hold, especially when the other person resists it. It is the ability to tolerate their disappointment without abandoning yourself. It is the ability to stay calm when they try to provoke guilt. It is the ability to let them misunderstand you without running after them to fix their version of you. That is a deep shift. And for many people, it is the first time they have ever truly practiced self-respect in a relationship. Self-respect in this context is quiet. It does not need a performance. It does not need a speech. It does not need revenge. It simply stops volunteering for emotional confusion. It stops over-explaining. It stops negotiating with behavior that has already shown you what it is. It chooses peace over intensity. It chooses consistency over chemistry. It chooses reality over hope when hope has been used as a leash. And this is important too. The point is not to become cold. The point is not to lose your capacity for love. The point is to become more discerning with where your attention goes. Attention is valuable. It shapes your inner world. It tells your mind what matters. When you keep giving your focus to someone who disturbs your peace, your life starts organizing itself around that disturbance. But when you pull your attention back, slowly and deliberately, your energy begins to rebuild. You sleep better. You think more clearly. Your body softens. Your identity starts returning. You remember what it feels like to have a day that is not emotionally managed by someone else's unpredictability. That is when real healing begins. Not when she changes, not when she comes back differently, not when she finally admits what she did, but when you stop needing her behavior to determine your emotional state. That is freedom. It is not dramatic, it is steady. It is the moment you realize that peace was never going to come from winning the dynamic. It was going to come from leaving it. So if you are in that place now, if you are fighting the urge to re-engage, if part of you still feels guilty for going quiet, remember this. You are not disappearing to manipulate. You are stepping back to recover your mind. You are creating distance so you can hear your own thoughts again. You are interrupting a pattern that taught you to doubt yourself. And every time you choose not to respond to what is designed to pull you back into confusion, you strengthen something in yourself that was weakened for too long. You do not need to hate her to let go. You do not need to prove she was the villain in every moment. You only need to be honest about what the relationship did to your peace. You only need to recognize that love without safety becomes harm. You only need to accept that someone can be magnetic, wounded, charming, and emotionally destructive at the same time. That truth is enough. And as difficult as this may be right now, one day the silence will stop feeling like loss and start feeling like protection. One day you will stop checking for signs. One day your mind will no longer revolve around what she meant, what she felt, or whether she ever truly cared. One day the need to understand every detail will fade, because your life will no longer depend on decoding someone who lived through emotional control. What will matter then is that you came back to yourself. That is what changes everything. Not her reaction, not whether she reaches out, not whether she misses you. What changes everything is that you begin to see clearly. You begin to detach calmly. You begin to trust your own experience again. You begin to understand that your value does not increase when someone difficult chooses you, and it does not decrease when they punish your distance. Your value was never in the chase. Your value was always in your clarity, your heart, your steadiness, and your ability to return to yourself. So let the silence teach you. Let the distance reveal what constant contact kept hidden. Let yourself feel the discomfort without turning it into a reason to go back. Peace may feel unfamiliar at first, but unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Sometimes it simply means healthy. Sometimes it means you are finally walking away from what kept you emotionally trapped. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop giving your attention to the place where it was repeatedly used against you. and start giving it to the life, the healing, and the self-respect that are waiting for you now.